Something unprecedented just happened. Cliff Barackman, one of the most respected, level-headed researchers from Finding Bigfoot, has finally broken his silence. In a sudden live stream, Cliff confirmed that a secret episode from Season 5 was pulled, wiped, and buried by an unknown organization only minutes after filming wrap. According to him, it contained the most disturbing physical evidence of a hominid species ever captured. But cameras weren't the only things erased. Field notes, thermal files, and even crew memories were targeted. Before we begin, subscribe, because what Cliff reveals could unravel everything we thought we knew about the woods. When Finding Bigfoot entered its 5th production cycle, nothing seemed unusual. In fact, fans were excited. The show teased a high-risk lockdown at a watershed in Washington state, deep inside forest acreage so remote that even Google Earth blurred sections of terrain. Internally, the crew referred to it as Cascade Creek, and according to Cliff Barackman, this was supposed to be their most important investigation yet. Early scouting revealed strange tree breaks, unnatural humidity pockets, and claw marks with opposing curvature, like something grabbed the bark with 2 thumbs. Production scheduled 3 nights of filming, but after day 1, the tone on set shifted. Crew reported tension in the air, like static pressure before lightning. The forest canopy muffled sound, swallowing voices a few feet away. Cliff commented on camera that the woods felt spatially wrong, distances stretching and compressing between shots. Joking, he chalked it up to lack of sleep, but his body language told a different story. Even skeptics on the team noticed the silence. No insects, no birds, no coyote calls. A forest that quiet isn't sleeping, it's listening. When night fell, thermal cameras detected 3 heat signatures moving along ridgelines. Not animal heat profiles, but hominid-shaped silhouettes with elongated calves. As the crew debated, something vocalized from the riverbed. It wasn't a whoop, it wasn't a howl. It was 2 voices layered over each other, one low, one falsetto, harmonizing on accident. Bobo froze mid-sentence and whispered, "That's not biomechanically normal." Moments later, a tree shook violently 30 yards away, but seismic readings showed no ground tremor. Cliff tagged the bark with a sampling kit and found bioluminescent residue glowing faintly green, like algae, except dry and warm to the touch. Producers high-fived. They knew they had something real. Then production flagged the episode as sensitive. This isn't unusual. Sometimes government land is involved. But on the drive back to town, 2 black SUVs followed at a legal distance. No plates, tinted window. At the hotel, the props manager noticed their equipment had been rearranged. Cases opened, zippers half closed. Memory card organizers shifted. Cliff joked on camera, "Either the cleaning staff is curious, or we're not alone anymore." That line was cut from every promo. And the next morning, the network's internal schedule listing the episode simply disappeared. Not delayed, deleted. The second night began like any other investigation. Camera calibration, mic levels, perimeter sweeps. But the forest still hadn't woken up. No wind pushed the canopy. No insect song threaded the branches. It was as if sound itself refused to cross that tree line. Cliff noted in his log, almost whispering, "Silence this thick usually means apex predation." But of what? Around 12:41 a.m., the crew captured their first full-bodied vocalization. At first, it resembled a territorial primate call, low, chesty, resonant. But halfway through the howl, a second voice layered beneath it, vibrating at a slightly different pitch. It wasn't echo, it wasn't harmonics. Audio analysis later showed 2 independent vocal folds. No known North American animal can do that. As the noise rippled across the valley, Bobo stiffened. He'd spent decades hearing Bigfoot whoops, distant knocks, deep bellows. But this sound carried something he said he'd never heard before. Volition, purpose. "That thing knew where we were," he muttered, voice tight. Minutes later, something slammed into a spruce tree 40 yards away. Not from the trunk, but from the midpoint, 15 feet up. The impact was so violent that bark exploded outward. Cliff swung his flashlight toward the branches, capturing a glimpse of something climbing sideways along the interior limbs. Not hand over hand like a monkey, more like a centipede. centipede, but human-sized, moving in sudden, silent bursts. Thermal cams flickered. The silhouette vanished, but the heat trace remained suspended in the air for 3 seconds, like a body that had been there longer than physics allowed. Then the mimicry began. From deeper within the watershed came laughter. Cliff's laughter. The exact laugh he'd given earlier that day while joking about misidentifying scat. Same rhythm, same pitch, same hesitating stutter, but the second repetition dragged oddly long. Vowels stretched like elastic, someone learning to imitate human joy. The crew froze. Seconds later, Cliff's voice echoed from 2 different directions at once. "Hey guys! Over here!" But Cliff hadn't spoken. Jay raised his parabolic mic and caught whispers traveling between treetops, not at ground level. They rode the canopy like radio transmission. When slowed down in post, the whispers formed broken sentences. Observe, harvest, adapt. Before the team could retreat, a boulder, easily 200 pounds, crashed into the riverbed beside them without any rolling sound preceding it. It had not tumbled, it had been placed. Bobo shook his head, whispering, "Something's escorting us." And up on the ridge, 2 amber eyes blinked, then another pair, offset by 12 feet, blinked out of sync. Whatever was hunting wasn't alone. By the 3rd night, Cliff pushed for physical samples. Stories are one thing, but biological residue changes everything. They returned to the riverbed where the 200-pound boulder had landed. Beneath it, pressed into the silt, they found a smear of gelatinous tissue, transparent like cartilage, stretching into thin strands that shimmered under infrared. Cliff scraped a piece into a vial, noting the faint scent, ozone and rotting cedar. Next, they discovered something that froze every crew member in place. Fiber hair bundles embedded 6 feet up the trunk of a Douglas fir. Under magnification, each strand showed hollow, segmented cores that flexed when pressed. Cliff described it as part feather, part fiber optic. Even stranger, when exposed to UV light, the strands glowed faintly blue, tracing branching fractal patterns. Bobo suggested it might be structural reinforcement for climbing. Cliff disagreed. "This looks engineered." As cameras rolled, Cliff noticed tree bark where something, not claws, but 2 opposable digits, had pulled downward, leaving a mirrored impression. Humans have 1 opposable thumb. Primates only partially. These impressions showed 2, positioned like a clamp. Cliff's voice cracked. "This thing manipulates tools." Then they found the bone fragment. Wedged between cedar roots, it was smooth, pale, and perfectly polished. The outer surface bore faint etching, like microscopic grooves manufactured for mechanical stress relief. When Cliff tapped it lightly, it resonated at a specific frequency, like a tuning fork. Jay's thermal camera showed the fragment was warmer than the soil around it, despite lying buried. Things escalated further when the parabolic mic detected movement signatures circling them, triangulated footsteps synchronized around their perimeter. Something moved in formation. Predator wolves don't do that. Primates don't either. Suddenly, the audio spiked. A shrill, metallic shriek vibrated the earbuds and knocked Bobo to his knees. The waveform wasn't organic. It bore the digital compression pattern of something recording and replaying itself back. Cliff's screen displayed packet loss artifacts, as if someone's phone was being intercepted. That's when Billy shouted. 20 yards ahead, half buried in the moss, he found knuckle padding. Thick, rubber-like cartilage discs fused to bone, worn smooth, as though something walked on its fists. The size indicated a weight between 400 to 500 pounds, but with 0 heel pressure, suggesting it distributed its mass unnaturally, almost like someone trying to imitate quadrupedalism. Cliff bagged every sample, adrenaline buzzing. He whispered, "This isn't folklore. This species is mid-transition." The forest answered by knocking 3 times, then a 4th, shifted slightly off rhythm, like an echo trying to become original. Moments later, the trees went silent. The investigation was no longer about Bigfoot. It had become evidence collection, and something in the woods realized it had been caught. The air changed first. Cliff would later describe it as barometric compression, like a storm collapsing inward instead of rolling in from a distance. Jay's boom mic crackled with static, then went dead. That shouldn't happen in open woodland. Radio equipment started cross-talking without input, fragments of their own earlier sentences whispering back back through the earpieces out of order. The forest was playing conversation like shuffled audio cards. At 1:13 a.m., the first resonance event hit. It began as a low vibration in the soil, barely felt, just enough to rattle the vents on the camera housing. But then, the resonance traveled up the tree trunks, hundreds of them, causing needles to tremble in unison, not rustling in wind, vibrating, harmonic. Every trunk oscillated at the same frequency, as if responding to a tuning fork. The sound triggered nausea. Jay vomited behind a stump. Bobo shouted for distance. Cliff checked his GPS. The screen pulsed, coordinates dissolving into repeating digits. 33.33 divided by 33.33. That's not a location. That's a loop. When the resonance stopped, the silence felt worse, like the woods were holding breath. Then came the knock sequence. 3 knocks to their left. A pause. 2 knocks behind them. A pause. 1 knock above from the canopy. It wasn't random. It was positional mapping, triangulation. Something was tracking them using sound. Thermal picked up a heat signature crouched on the underside of a branch. Spider-like, arms pointed downward, legs bowed unnaturally. But when Cliff blinked, the signature split into 2, then 3, as if the image were being mirrored imperfectly. The copies wavered like smoke. The parabolic mic finally stabilized long enough to catch breath patterns, rhythmic but mismatched. One exhalation late, like something learning how lungs work. Bobo, voice cracking. "It's practicing!" Something heavy crashed 10 yards away. The crew moved to flank, but the crash repeated from the opposite direction. Identical amplitude, identical waveform. Jay realized both sounds were recordings. Something was copying environmental events and replaying them like bait. The real crash came a moment later, right behind the cameraman. It snapped a sapling clean in half. The camera tumbled, landing lens up. For 3 seconds, it caught the silhouette of a figure hovering just beneath a branch, knees clenched to its chest, balancing without effort. Then its head turned, too slowly, too deliberately, to look directly into the lens. The eyes didn't glow. They reflected, not light. Cliff's own face, mirrored faintly across the cornea. The team bolted. Cameras swung wildly. Branches didn't crack under their pursuers' weight. It followed like gravity had less claim on it. Halfway to the vehicles, they heard a voice ahead. "Guys, wait up!" Cliff stopped. It was Bobo's voice, but Bobo was right beside him. The woods erupted with overlapping versions of that sentence. 6, then 8, then dozens, pitched differently, pacing differently, learning tonal inflection. It wasn't chasing them, it was sizing them. When they finally broke into the clearing, all the trees behind them stopped vibrating at once, as if the forest had just closed its eyes. By the time the crew reached the motel, everyone was silent in that shaken, wide-eyed way survivors get. But Cliff couldn't shake the feeling that something from the woods had followed. Around 2:18 a.m., heavy-palmed footsteps dragged across the hallway carpet. Slow, 2-beat rhythm, weight distributed on knuckles like a quadruped, forcing itself upright. When Cliff checked the peephole, the hall was empty, yet the parabolic mic recorded breath patterns behind the door. Seconds later, whisper playbacks began, partial lines they had spoken hours earlier, rearranged out of order like something assembling meaning. Cliff whispered back, "You're not supposed to know language." Then came the delivery. At sunrise, Cliff opened his door and froze. Resting gently on the doormat was the vibrating bone fragment they'd collected, warm to the touch, humming faintly. Attached was a note written in stiff, uneven lettering, "Keep quiet." But the fiber texture on the ink suggested it wasn't written by a pen. It was pressed, like cartilage, dragged across paper. When they returned to the production van, every biological sample was missing. Cameras, drives, and gear remained untouched. Police shrugged. The network told them to drop it. Overnight, the episode's listing vanished from the internal schedule. Metadata was scrubbed. 3 days later, Cliff spotted a plain white van outside his house. 2 men stepped out, wearing identical boots. One held a handheld scanner, lights pulsing softly. Cliff filmed from upstairs, but the footage saved as perfect static. File size unchanged. That's not deletion, that's replacement. The next morning, Cliff found a printed transcript taped to his window. Complete sentences he spoke in the the motel room, down to every pause. At the bottom, typed cleanly, "You are not studying them. They are studying us." Crew contracts were altered retroactively. Pay stubs removed travel dates. Producers claimed they'd never filmed in those woods. Worse, the people involved began forgetting. One editor swore she never worked the footage at all. A sound tech had no memory of capturing the layered vocalization. When pressed, he blinked, confused, and asked, "Cascade what?" That night, another note appeared, this one on the inside of Cliff's kitchen window, taped from within. "Let us erase it, or we erase you." The bone fragment disappeared from his attic. No break-in, no missing dust, gone from reality like the episode. Cliff realized the truth. This wasn't a cover-up, it was containment. And containment only matters when something is still out there. Cliff tried to bury himself in normal life, lectures, emails, museum duties, but silence doesn't equal peace. Every night brought mirrors that seemed to lag reflections, faint knocks behind drywall, and the uneasy sense that the house's footprint wasn't static. Still, he stayed quiet until the footage surfaced. No message, no sender, just a flash drive in his mailbox. When Cliff opened the files, his stomach hollowed. The thermal footage from Cascade Creek had been stabilized and scrubbed of static. The hovering figure, blazing white against black forest heat, told a different story. Its limbs weren't just long. They elongated mid-movement, bones telescoping under skin, joints shifting like wet hinges adapting to terrain. The knuckle pads they found? Visible now as heat sinks, dispersing energy into soil without leaving prints, an evolutionary trick to stay invisible. The face burned worst. It wasn't blank, it changed. Expression sliding through Bobo's grin, Cliff's scowl, Jay's confused eyes. Not mimicry, rehearsal, something perfecting human emotion like phonetics. Another angle showed their campsite, night vision green, calm, until the background rearranged. Trees bending inward, trunks quivering, branches folding into shapes like rib cages. It wasn't moving through the forest was helping it. A third clip, audio waveforms peaking at identical intervals across multiple microphones. Not one creature vocalizing. 6. Harmonizing across ridgelines, triangulating echolocations like a sonar grid. Territorial, coordinated, military. Last, a thermal drone shot. 6 signatures arranged surgically around the watershed, evenly spaced, a containment ring. Not predators, sentinels, protecting something deeper. Cliff's house lights flickered, then headlights washed across his front lawn. A black SUV, doors opened quietly. 3 individuals, no insignia, walked to his porch. No masks, no urgency. The oldest spoke calmly through the door. "You've seen enough to understand why the episode cannot exist." Cliff asked who they were. Silence. A second voice. "You weren't meant to collect samples. You weren't meant to record patterns. These organisms fall under a federal classification older than your show. Organisms, not cryptids." Humanoid silence stretched thick. Then the threat. "If this goes public, Cascade Creek won't be the only perimeter we expand." Moments before the SUV left, one man turned back, voice quiet but cold. "There's a reason national forests are mapped with missing squares." As taillights vanished, Cliff looked at his phone. New voicemail. No words, just the knocking pattern, but slowed, like something learning rhythm. And behind it, faint breathing. Inside the house, Cliff didn't sleep after the SUV left. Instead, he sat in his living room, every light on, bone-deep exhaustion wrapped around fear. Around 3:12 a.m., the house creaked, old wood settling, he told himself. But settlement doesn't pace. There it was again, 4 steps above him, slow, deliberate. Something was moving where no footsteps should exist. He grabbed the parabolic mic, pointed upward. Through the static came a breath, not animal, not human. A slow inhale, then a forced exhale, like lungs imitating what they'd only observed. Cliff whispered, "What do you want?" The attic replied with his exact voice. "What do you want?" Not playback. It answered, 2 seconds late, emotional tone wrong, syllables too heavy, something practicing. Cliff bolted outside, Cold air hit him like a wall. That's when he saw them, 3 silhouettes at the forest's edge, not standing, perched, arms clamped to trunks, legs bowed beneath them like sprung metal. Eyes reflected not moonlight, but faces, human faces projected in the corneas, scanning, indexing. When Cliff blinked, the silhouettes shuddered and vanished upward into branches with no sound at all, not running away, repositioning. At dawn, Cliff went to authorities. He expected dismissal. Instead, the ranger behind the desk stiffened at the mention of the watershed. He glanced toward an office door and whispered, "Don't file a report. You'll open a case you can't close." Then he slid a brochure over the counter. National Forest closures. Tiny squares blacked out with no explanation. Cascade Creek wasn't the only one. When Cliff returned home, fresh prints, knuckle pads, tracked across the dew on his lawn, perfectly spaced, intentional, leading to his front door, not away from it. His laptop pinged. A new folder had been added. Forest Point 4. Inside it, images of houses, suburban backyards, shot from above, marked with circular patterns in surrounding tree growth, the same fractal geometry found in the glowing residue on the windshield. Those patterns weren't natural, they were territorial claims, and more appeared weekly. Trail cam footage across the Pacific Northwest began glitching in the same looped audio pattern the creatures used. Then reports from Montana, Idaho, Northern California, people hearing their own voices outside windows, knuckles tapping walls, trees vibrating just before dawn. Cascade Creek wasn't a secret episode, it was a starting line. Tonight, Cliff's porch camera triggered again. He checked the feed. Nothing but static, until a faint, distorted whisper cut through, "Let us grow." The final frame flickered and revealed something perched just outside the view, something that had learned how to avoid the lens. Cliff ended his statement with one sentence. If forests are expanding silently, ask yourself, who are they expanding for? He's breaking the news because silence doesn't stop growth. Containment only matters when what's contained is still evolving. And somewhere, right now, a tree trunk just vibrated once, then twice, then a third knock, slightly off rhythm, learning you.